All right, so it's Friday night. I'm playing around with some reactive UI concepts. I've got an echo in my headphones. I have such wonderful audio set up. Let me see. So we'll try this again. I'm still hearing myself, but maybe that resolves itself. Maybe if I seems like it can't. I'll try that and see what happens. I'll try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So now I try that and see what happens. So I hear that. So I hear that. So I hear that. Audio capture. So I hear that. So, yeah, I don't know where that sound is coming from. Did it go away? I think it went away. Alright, so I'll just have to listen to myself in my head all night. That'll be fun. Take the headphones off because the headphones seem to be making it not work. So I guess I have an audio issue and I probably just need to get that looked at. Take the headphones off because the headphones seem to be making it not work. Alright, so I'm gonna stop messing around with this audio and I'm getting a screen flicker now, which is like. Alright, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna switch the streaming setup back to the old streaming setup. Maybe, and see if that fixes things. Hopefully I won't get a flickering screen. I have no idea what's going on with my rig tonight. Maybe I just need to take a step back and reboot. Okay, the screen stopped flickering. And I think my audio's back. All right. So, now you can see more of my screen. So, I'm looking at the documentation on value converters for ReactiveUI. Talking around like value conversion. So, like Xamarin has value converters, and like they're really useful. You can put them in. You can create them in C Sharp. You can put them in your XAML, and you can do a lot of really interesting things with them. Maybe you probably can't see everything here, so you can do a lot of really interesting things. What I tend to find is, and this is gonna, and I'm gonna contradict myself later, but that's okay. So I like to do things in my C Sharp layer on my, I guess on my XAML code behind, as you would call it. It's only in one speaker. That just seems like I don't have any. I have no idea what's going on with my audio. I'm gonna have to play around with it. So, all right. At least you can hear me. So you can do a lot of stuff with these value converters. You can do Boolean value conversions. I'm sure most people have done like the inverse Boolean value converter a billion and one times. You can convert enums. You can do string changes. You can convert numbers to strings. Like it basically just gives you an extension point to convert a value for the view. So a lot of times, like in MVVM, you don't really want to concern your view model with what's in your view. And sometimes people will parse data and and bubble the data up from the view model to the UI. So I was having a conversation about that earlier this week, and I was like, that's not really great. If I'm trying to be the gung ho MVVM stickler, like the view should take care of view level concerns. So I had been meaning to write a bunch of value converters, like, or better yet, cherry pick ones that I've already written from various things and kind of centralize them. So I figured I'd talk about value conversion in Reactive UI. Reactive UI provides an extension point from an MVVM perspective, as opposed to a platform specific perspective, and what I mean is that I can reuse the same value converter across WPF, UWP, pretty much anywhere where Reactive UI runs. I can rerun this value converter. If I tie myself to Xamarin Forms value conversion, then I'm stuck with it in Xamarin Forms, and everything is in my view, so I don't get any reuse. Now, I said earlier that I try and keep my XAML just the presentation layer. So my general rule of XAML is like I'm fine with XAML as long as XAML doesn't start to contain too much state, and it just is a skin. Like I just want it to be a presentation. I don't want it to think too much or to do too much, because I just wanted to kind of to do a lot of stuff. Not to mention like some of those things that you would do in value converters, you can do in C sharp and not have to worry about it in XAML. So it becomes a place where I can now, I mean, value converters in C sharp, you can do the same thing to a degree, but I'm going to show you a couple of tricks with Reactive UI where I can just spit it out on the screen. So I've got this dummy project that I've been playing with, and I'm calling it my showroom. And I actually have exactly that, right? So I have some state that is bleeding out, and I'm gonna cauterize that state tonight. So this is gonna be brief. I'm just gonna kind of walk through this and walk through a couple of places where value converters actually are like useful, and then I'm gonna kind of back off of it and and look at some navigation stuff that I've been playing with recently. I've been looking at a lot of the sexist stuff. What are you calling state in XAML? What am I calling state? So like I would say to me, data triggers are a the reaction to a state, but they set state. So like I guess yeah, it does, it sets the state of the view. So things like I wouldn't call a binding state, right? That's not really state. I would call parameters that you would pass in XAML, I would call that state, right? Like, but state is kind of like this ambiguous term that, big bad people use to, ward off change. So I won't be that guy. I'll just simply say that I prefer to do my conversion, and the majority of the things outside of XAML, because I feel like XAML just being the presentation, just being the skin is better. I do my bindings in C sharp, using ReactiveUI's binding engine. And part of the reason why I do that and how this conversation kind of escalated was talking about value conversion, how to do that. And I was like, oh, I can do that in C sharp, and then I can use that in any given target that I want to. Not to mention, I also have some, and I'll show this dirty laundry. I also have some stuff back here, where again, this could be done a different way. And it was asked, the person that I was having the conversation with looked at this and kind of was like, okay, like I would just bind that through I would keep all of that in my view model. And I'm like, yes and no. I can make cases for either. But the case that I make for this right here is this is closer to the metal, than going through the binding engine and then back, or going into the view model and then back out, just to get information on something that happened in the view. So I'll do a lot of things like this where I'm actually responding to an event that's triggered by the view, the same way you would do if you did like oh, I haven't done it in so long. I'm laughing that I can't remember, but oh yeah, you would instantiate some command, some tapped handler, right? That's the same concept of what you're looking at. So I won't belabor that too much, but just pointing out that there are things that you can do in C sharp that I prefer to do in C sharp, and I know I'm probably in the minority when it comes to people who like XAML, and that doesn't bother me. Anyway, so talking about data, right? So I've got this enumerable string of regions. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, here there's two things that I'm doing here that are funny. So I've got this enumerable set of regions, right? That I'm selecting out the regions, and then I'm explicitly converting them to camel case. And I actually may end up failing miserably tonight because my brain is hurting, and, and I just realized why I did this in the first place. Because I was trying to move fast and just trying to get this done. So, because I ran into a roadblock. But I wrote this I binding type converter, pretty similar to how you would write a value converter. As my simulator should be over here. Yeah, there we go. Similar to how you would write a value converter in Xamarin Forms. You just have your extension point, and then you would just wire up your extension point. So we have a concept of affinity from an object to an object. And really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take a string and just split it on its camel case. This is where it's funny, right? Because I'm using that select statement and I wrote this whole thing. So this is actually probably a bad place to use this, but I'm gonna spin this thing up and see if there's any good information on there that might look, because I haven't looked at this UI probably in a week. Okay, so let's look at this list view. So none of that matters, right? Oh, I guess okay, so I could do that. I could be cute and just do that there for this particular one. That has no information. Oh, I still haven't released Sextant. Damn it, I need to do that release. I'm probably gonna do that release tonight, as a matter of fact. 'Cause I'm like, man, that's such a bad bug. Oh, I write bad code sometimes. Okay, so like basically all that split camel case is doing is splitting these values down here on camel case. So like you have Blue Mountain, you have El Salvador, uh, you know, Papua New Guinea. These are actually just strings, constants somewhere in this regions file, right? So that's all they are, and I'm just explicitly camel casing them in my file so that I can split them on camel case later, right? There's no like real magic. This is basic. So what I'm gonna do, I think, if I can not be bad at this, is only change. See, cause yeah, okay, cause this is where it gets weird. Cause I'm doing it on a string, and this split camel case is just a regex. There's nothing. Well, yeah, regex is not easy. I know some people that are really amazing at regex, and I am not one of those people. I want to be, but I don't. It looks so. Actually, it's really just pattern matching. It's probably really not that hard if I really applied myself. But like, do I want to be the guy that knows regex and gets asked to do all the regex stuff? Would you want to be that guy? Probably not. Okay, so we'll leave. We'll take this out. I don't know if this is gonna work correctly. It probably still will, because it's just applying a regex, right? It's just applying a regex over a string. So it really won't matter at what point we apply the regex. Well, yeah, regex is like actual black magic. And I got a buddy that is really good at it because one of his first languages was Perl. And let me tell you, the conversations we have, like I get mad sometimes when he just starts going off into this regex world and like I don't understand what he's doing. And like we're pairing on something and he goes off into regex and I'm like, I'm gonna just sit here and twiddle my thumbs because I feel slow. Like, how'd you get so good at this? Oh, I used to do it all the time. That's how it always happens. Okay, so what I was doing before was I was selecting out the regions here and then doing a split on this on the separator to give it the space. Yeah, so I can still technically do that maybe. I don't know if this is going to work. I thought we may have to change our value converter, which we can check to see if what's coming into the value. Okay. I'll bite. So, okay, we're going to cheat. And this will probably backfire. Like, I have a feeling that this whole stream is just going to be bad, bad business. Camel case split enumerable. Yeah. Enumerable converter. I still got this thing running. I should probably stop it. Okay, so that's at least a different file now. So really what we want this to be is like an I enumerable of type string. Yeah, can we do that? Does that work? Yay. Okay, so now what we're getting is that whole thing, and we can go back over here and snag this this code here. All right, because at this point, okay, so we're just gonna be special because Rodney doesn't feel like being smart tonight. We're just gonna hard cast this thing real quick so that I can look at the public API because I'm feeling lazy tonight, folks. All right, so we gotta get a numerator, so it just gets all the stuff. I can do a select. So from here, I can do the select, right? Or maybe I can just do this. I can pump this because really what we're doing is string.join on this. Yeah, so that's gonna go there because regions is our I enumerable. And then we don't need a .to string because it's already going to do a .to string. But what we can do is still apply the split on camel case. So this is going to be weird. This is going to be funny. Let's see how this works out. So we got a cell. So there's a couple of ways that you can invoke it. So I'm going to pull up the docs again because docs are great because I don't have to remember everything because it's written down. So I refer to my own documentation. Like I find issues with our documentation sometimes just by going through it and looking at it and like, wait, this didn't work for me. So one of the things we're gonna talk about in the doc, so this is to try convert, right? So we talk about registration. I'm not gonna register it. I'm just gonna inline it. So this VM to view converter override. So this is kind of the beauty of it, right? Like in the reactive UI binding itself. And this again is a plug for coded bindings. In the reactive UI binding itself, I can explicitly use a value converter. Now this is the fun part about doing registration. If I do registration, I can register to the DI container and not incur the cost of newing one up every time and just have the value converter in there and it will use the value converter where it's supposed to use the value converter. That said, I'm going to explicitly inline it because I want to show a couple things. So first thing I'll show is this is the, let me reduce that real quick. So what you see here on line 20, this is technically inline value conversion in reactive UI. So just how you would do like a string formatter on your XAML. This is basically string format. The difference is that I can actually debug into this. And because of my IDE, I can debug into specific parts of it. So this is, I can bump up the font size. Give me a second. Let me figure out how to do the things. Let's just change that to 18. Is that better? I still haven't figured out the right streaming resolution. Like I've tried 3 different streaming resolutions and I cannot seem to get it right. So I'm just going to accept the fact that I'm not good at those things. I'm still going to try, but obviously I haven't figured it out. Which means I probably just haven't tried hard enough. So this is inline value conversion. So I can actually just do my whatever type of conversion I want right here by providing a selector. So let's say I wanted to you wouldn't want to do this, but let's say I wanted to cast this out to something else, I could. Because this is basically literally just a select statement. So this is just some select statement that's going to return whatever it is to the view. So I can do that inline in my one-way binding, in my two-way binding. I can do it right there in a pinch. Again, the beauty of this right here is sometimes I just need to figure out, like, will this work? Can I hack this, and then maybe I'll move this into an actual value converter for additional reuse later. And sometimes it makes sense to just do it in line. If I'm doing a simple string, I could do, or a decimal, on a value, or I need a monetary value, right? I need currency. I can do that inline, real simple. I can do a value converter, but maybe that's too much. So Reactive UI allows you to do that inline in the C Sharp, and that's one of the things that I absolutely loved about it. So I won't belabor that. I'll just go ahead and jump in and see if we can do this. VM to V override is going to be new. So that's an interesting thing, that it already knows what the type that's supposed to be, and it's suggesting me types. I love intelligent code IDEs. They make my life so much better. Okay, so now we'll see if this thing actually does the thing. So we're going to put a breakpoint. Oh, there's already a breakpoint, so off we go. This is going to be fun. I don't think I did that. I didn't do the dot trim, so this might get weird. And I'm explicitly putting a regex afterwards, so like this. Oh, there's a trim at the end of the regex. YOLO. So it hasn't done the thing yet, so we click on it. All right, so my from is the full. Ooh. Did we put this on the wrong thing? I'm sitting over here talking and running my mouth. It may have put it on the wrong cell. Nope, it's not on the wrong cell. This one has a count, so I can just, yeah, there we go. That one has a count of 5. That's what we want. So this one has a count of 5. So we've got 5 explicit things that are in it. It looks like it's already been applied. Oh, it hasn't already been applied. That one was just different. That one I did different. Okay. So this one is using explicitly Papua New Guinea. So we're going to look for the one that has Papua New Guinea. And Papua New Guinea, I know I'm like butchering the name. Trying to sound cultured, yeah. Hey, look at that. So the one that says Papua New, oh, that's why I'm getting extra space here, because it's adding a space here. So much smarter than myself. See, I write contradictory code. This is why unit tests are good. In Hawaii, all that seems like it's getting an extra space. Where am I getting that extra space from? Dot trim. Let's just do the dot trim. Anyway, so we see here that adding something like that to a value converter is good, right? So like, okay, Rodney, that's a contrived example. Yes, you're right, but we're talking about value conversion. I mean, everything is a contrived example. I could give you 15 different reasons for why you might want to do value conversion. None of them are going to be not contrived. Oh, I've got an enum and I wanted to see whether or not I should display this based on a value. Okay, I want to convert a Boolean to the inverse of itself. Right? That's a really contrived example, but it seems like everybody writes that value converter. So, value conversion has, oh God, that's going to be horrible. I'm not going to say it. I'm just not going to say it. Let's take this breakpoint out, because this breakpoint's going to get annoying. So, because we know it's getting hit, right? So now it's doing a trim. I still think I'm getting extra spaces. Maybe my regex is wrong. See, this is where like regex is like, oh, this is so annoying, because like there's regex magic in here that I don't understand. Because of course I just stole this regex somewhere off the internet and prayed that it was gonna solve my problem, like any good developer would do. I went to Stack Overflow and copied and pasted the regex, because that's bothering me. That's gonna bother me. Split camel case dot trim. Maybe I do that. No, okay, so I'll do dot trim. But see, I feel like it needs to happen closer. You know what? I'm just not gonna worry about it. You see the point. I want to say I've written other ones recently. Like I've written the inverse value converter one somewhere. I can probably go grab that code and pull it in and show you that. As a matter of fact, I wrote some stuff for the ReactiveUI Prism sample that use value converters. Yeah, so I used to so when back when I had a Windows box, I used to have a lot of tools that helped me build regex, but all of those tool creators unfortunately created awesome tools for Windows before this whole XPlat thing became like legit. So I'm stuck with not being able to use some of those tools anymore, or even remembering where they are. I want to say I've written like maybe a couple of regex myself, like looking at the regex. There's this green man page for regex that I always find and I always use, and I've built a couple, but can't say that I do it often. Okay, so yeah, value conversion. So like that's a that to me is a valuable tool because now I can write this value converter. No longer does my and that might actually be the problem is that our view model is still doing that thing. No, because it's just pulling in the values from here. Where is it getting that? Where's that getting set? That's getting set. So let's go just look. Go take a peek at when this thing gets transformed. Hopefully I didn't actually change any code, so when I click this button, it doesn't break. Okay, great, didn't break. Okay, so the regions, let me just sort of where x dot regions dot oh, are we doing this thing where my keys don't want to work correctly in certain windows while I'm streaming? Okay. Regions. Okay, yeah, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna fight with that today because that works every other day of the week. Oh. Okay, that accounts for at least that one looking the way it does. That doesn't account for all of them though. Rwanda. And these are all just regions of the world where coffees come from. Yeah, those good old Arabica beans that you drink in your Folgers in the morning. I make the joke. I don't drink Folgers. My grandparents used to drink. I want to say it was Folgers, either Folgers or Maxwell House, one of the two. And it would always be in this can, and I would smell it and couldn't wait to be old enough to drink coffee. And then I got old enough to drink coffee and was like, I can't drink that stuff. Sorry, I'm bougie. I need more than Folgers. Okay, so this just doesn't make sense. I'm gonna let this ride because it's coming in correctly. I'm no longer doing any magic in the view model. So now what we've done is we've lifted the concern of how our presentation layer looks at the data that we provided, right? And that was the other thing that I had in that conversation was like the view model really isn't the place for me to cure the data for the view to look at it. Like that's a view level concern, so I should do that on the view. And a lot of people say, well, XAML is the view, but if XAML was the view, then I promise you Microsoft would have no reason for this .cs code behind because they wouldn't just do a gratuitous .cs code behind for the sake of it, would they? If you could do everything in XAML, would they? I don't know. I don't know if I'm calling out XAML or if I'm calling out Microsoft. I'm actually not really calling out anybody. I think it's funny and making bad jokes. So anyway, so you see how doing value conversion stuff, like I said, we can do all sorts of stuff because we've got an affinity, right? So you saw how we changed it from it being the affinity of a type of string to an enumerable of strings. So like if we do this again, right, and we take this back to string and we recompile, this might actually blow up. which also means you can reuse the same value converters for certain things, right? So I rewrote this value converter, but we're actually going to go back and change this now. So yeah, we just, doing things the short, easy way, and you see all the mistakes you make along the way. Ooh, that's a lot of extra white space. Maybe it's the font. I'm gonna go with it's the font. Well, so I've been a Microsoft developer my entire professional career. I will say that I have enjoyed every Microsoft technology I've worked on. That said, Microsoft has deprecated several pieces of technology out from under me that I thought was the most amazing thing since sliced bread. But every time I think that, they bring forth a new technology. So, like, if it's Microsoft, it's Microsoft. I'm not mad. Um, I think the fact that I can code in C Sharp and C Sharp is becoming more functional, and it's not a true functional language. But like, I actually really want to get into F Sharp these days because I keep hearing F Sharp developers tell me how amazing F Sharp. Yeah, I don't think anyone's as bad as Google. um, and I'm not really a Google fan. Apple's kind of starting to piss me off, but Microsoft is really, as of late, they're impressing me. And then like you get the random message where I read about the app get uh, thing with Microsoft, and like you read about that, and then you're like, oh, maybe they're regressing, and it's like, and does that negate all of the good that they've done recently? No, it doesn't negate all of the good that they've done recently. It just points out the fact that they have not gotten it 100% right. They're still growing. They're still learning from their own selves, from their own mistakes. You know, and I know an organization that big has to have silos. So is what Microsoft did right? No. Should they seek to make amends? Yes. Is it the end of the world? Like, do we need to make this, the coding apocalypse? No, we need to be mindful of it. We need to learn from it. We need to make sure that things like this don't happen in the future, or try and find ways to make them happen better in the future. Yeah. So now that I've got off that soapbox, I'm gonna stop getting political here and get into more of this code here. So I did this thing, and I guess this still technically works, even though now I'm looking at a string. That's weird. I guess, I guess an IEnumerable of string is still a string. Ugh, because a string is just a character array, so it just becomes one really big character array. But for all intents and purposes, what I could have done is this. I could have done like another gate, and I could have done like if. And I actually am explicitly going to put this after because I want to see this hit this breakpoint this time and show me that it's a string and that it's actually type of string as opposed to type of IEnumerable. But like I can now reuse this value converter. So now I actually don't even need two named value converters. I can actually, I'm actually going to take this one and I'm going to delete this one. I'm going to save that. Oh, I broke it. We're going to not do that. We're going to do clicking the buttons, Rodney. Clicking the buttons. All right, so I know we just broke some stuff. So let's go ahead and do refactor and do a proper refactor. We're going to call it that thing, do next. That way it did a proper refactor. But I find it funny that the proper refactor doesn't automatically change my file. Oh, it did. I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna sit down and shut up. And I'm probably gonna jump off the value conversion thing. I mean, there's docs. If you want to learn more about it or want to understand how to use them, you run into an issue and don't understand how to use them, find me on Twitter. Find me in Slack. We'll get you going. But I mean, the documentation is relatively straightforward. So is anybody else seeing that we're not calling the affinity for this object, or did we not explicitly stop and restart? Okay, one usage. We're using it here where we override. Oh, so there's also like this is like the VM to view override, but there, I want to say there's also, just to give you an understanding of the API, I want to say there's a one that goes the other way too, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say there's like a view to VM. No, I guess there's not. I thought there was. I guess not. Okay, well. Okay. So why isn't this thing getting hit now? Or am I just not doing it right again? It's probably the case. Try to add string.replace and see if you can change the double space. Yeah. That should tell you if you have the font or the double space. Yeah, that's a good point. I could do an explicit string.replace on 2 spaces. And fam Dave, I am breaking everything. Everything I touch. See, okay. Okay, here we go. Maybe I was just clicking on the wrong page. So we're doing the value conversion. All that's fun and dandy. Yeah, okay, so we're not actually hitting the affinity. Why is that? Why are we not hitting the affinity? Oh, it looks like it's not actually hitting the breakpoint. Okay. Oh, I know why it's not hitting the affinity, because we're explicitly doing it. Because, okay. It helps if I remember my own points about this how things work. Yeah. See, I'm prone to not knowing what I'm doing all the time. Fam Dave. Ugh. So what we're talking about here is like this affinity for the objects. This actually happens if I do the registration. ReactiveUI is smart enough to apply these these binding type converters to the things that have the right affinity for them. So I don't do that because I feel like I'm not smart enough to set all that state and forget it. Like if I go in here and I try and set like all of these to like, oh, I can do it for this type and this type and this type, I'm gonna end up breaking something and I'm not gonna remember how I got there, and I'm gonna get really, really frustrated. But that's me. You may be a better steward of the code than me, and you can do it. I have to watch the replay. Oh man, have a good night. I know it's late there for you. It's probably like oh god, it's probably like 2 in the morning there. +6, you're +1, yeah, 6. So yeah, 2, almost 3. Yep, there we go. I had to do the +1 because daylight savings always throws me off when I do UTC conversions. Because like I'm good enough at like dropping where I am, like I'm -6, so I'm used to it being -6, but daylight savings is -5, and this is why like time is hard. And I'm gonna try and get a buddy of mine to come on and teach me how to use Nota time one of these days, when he stops being an ass and not wanting to stream with me. Have a good night. Sleep well. Staying up all late. So yeah, ReactiveUI uses this affinity and it's in the docs. If I had read the docs right, it uses this affinity when you register it. I'm not registering it, so it's not going to hit the affinity. I'm explicitly using it, so it's only going to do the thing. So what you're saying is I can do like a string.replace where, like, I can do a string.replace on the string that I'm sending in. Yeah, so I've used it. I've used Nota time, but like I'm the type of person where like I use a thing and I find this tool and I know I need this specific tool for this specific problem, but until like I really get a chance to sit down and play, I don't really understand what I can do with the tool, like what all the tool can do. I know the tool can do this because I found the tool because it does this. So I'm gonna try and get him on the hook in the next couple of weeks, because every time I talk to him and I bring up UTC conversion, he's like, Nota time, Nota time. I'm like, yes, I know, and I've used it, but how do I get more value out of it, right? Like I feel like I'm not getting the value out of Nota time that I could get as a developer, and until I can get that value, I can't really say, oh, everyone should be using Nota time, because people are gonna be like, oh, well, how do you use it? And I'm like, I don't know. Hey man, come do this thing. Oh, well, how do you do it? Well, I don't know. Anyway, So that's value conversion in a nutshell. Again, I can get into scenario upon scenario of where you might want to use value conversion, right? Like I might want to cast this into something else or whatever the case may be. But it gives you a very clean understanding of why I would use value conversion in MVVM. Oh man, how many times have I picked up the hammer to go hammer the screw, only to realize, a year later, yeah, I'm telling myself here, only to realize a year later that, hey, there's a perfectly good nail that you could use that would make that hammer way more effective. Yeah, yeah. Or me finding a way to bend the head of the nail to make it into a screw so I can screw it in. Like, who does these things? I do these things. I make things harder than they have to be and use tools for the wrong reason. So yeah, I'm kind of bored with this. I'm gonna move on to some more fun stuff. We're gonna look at Sextant, which is this navigation library that I've been kicking around for the past, I don't know how many months or weeks. But one of the consumers of the library, they're actually consuming it and using it in an app that is in the App Store. They wanted to some new features, so I started looking at the API for some stuff, and we're gonna dig in and look at. We're gonna hide Rodney's ugly red unit test. Although I think that unit test probably will go green now. It actually will probably not go green now that I think about it, because all this is new public API stuff. Yep, yeah, it's not gonna go green, and we don't care about it right now because that's just like public API generator tests. Um, so I was looking at, and let's go to sextant.xamarin Forms, and we're going to go here, and there's a navigation page, right? So on this navigation page, there are a series of events that happen. And I'm going to use this structure thing over here and hopefully try and group it by its events if I can make it happen. What will it let me group by? So this is somewhat, I'm actually going to suggest that as a feature if it's not already on their board, but this is close enough, right? So we can see it. On this navigation page, we've got a pushed event handler, right? So we get a notification from the navigation page itself that something was pushed. We get a popped to root event handler, and I remember reading some weird stuff about this event handler doing, not necessarily that it does weird stuff, but it operates differently than you would expect, not in a bad way, just in a different way. And then there's this popped event handler, which is I think anytime a page is popped. But I'm only looking at IL, not looking at the actual Xamarin Forms code, so I'm not going to infer. But what I found interesting was there are these requested handlers, right? So I talk a lot about reactive programming being a good way to model other types of programming. So people that do like event-based programming understand the concept of events, event handlers, invoking events, listening to events, unhooking from those events. All of those things are known, right? So uh, reactive extensions don't. It's kind of like BASF, I think is what it was. Yeah, BASF. I'm probably getting that wrong. In like the 90s, like they didn't make anything. They didn't actually produce anything. They just took other things and made them better, right? So like observables are like BASF, right? Like they don't actually do anything that other code couldn't do. They just do things that other code can do in a much better way. Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy. So the concept of, from a navigation perspective, right? Like having a navigation library, being able to respond to events, and I'll actually segue into a conversation I had with Shane on the Xamarin Forms team around Shell. He's been like part of the whole thing with Shell and MVVM is in MVVM, we're inherently responding to events, right? Like that's the majority of what we do. We create some commanding pattern and some event handler and respond, and the button click event handler does this command and fires into my view model and does this thing. Like that's the majority of what we do. So being able to get these events out was one of the things that was missing from Shell in its original API. And I spent a good, how I trickled onto this was I was looking at Shell's stuff, and then I was like, well, let me look at this feature that was requested by one of my consumers, and was like, hey, this is actually interesting. So the thing here that I can hook into is I've got these four, and I'm just going to go ahead and call them observables because that's what they are in my world. But these event handlers for requests to do work, right? So like this is just a request. So you request to Xamarin Forms to start the navigation, and then you get a navigation back. I do not care for Shell in its current in incarnation. I think Shane has done a great job making it better. I think the Xamarin Forms team has done a great job investing in Shell. I personally wish they hadn't created Shell and invested in it. I think that the current navigation was sufficient enough. I understand what they were trying to do, right? Like a lot of people use Prism navigation, and Prism uses URI navigation. So, let's bring that into Xamarin Forms. Again, like we just got done. I told you I was going to get off this soapbox, but we just got done talking about the whole, Microsoft pulling other people's code and then doing it. Like that's basically what they did with Shell. I candidly don't think that having a true MVVM framework in Xamarin Forms proper is a good idea. And I know I'm biased when I say that because I maintain an MVVM framework. I think that they should allow for community growth. I want to say that Prism actually came from Microsoft's best practices, patterns, and practices on MVVM. And Microsoft owned it for a while, and then they let it go, and now somebody else maintains that code, and I think that that's actually a very healthy thing, because what's going to happen is if if they put an MVVM framework in Xamarin Forms, then you're going to be tied to Xamarin Forms platform MVVM stuff, right? Just like you have to use Xamarin Forms XAML, now you're going to have to use Xamarin Forms MVVM, and then when you go to take, and you know what, we may do this one night, just take a sample project and create an entirely new target for it and show how we can use the same view models in the same in a completely different UI platform and make it work, because like you lose that ability immediately when you're tied to the UI platform. So I don't think that the MVVM framework belongs in the UI platform. I think it's the UI platform's responsibility to provide extensibility for MVVM platforms. So so in production applications, I've used Fresh MVVM, Reactive UI. I want to say I've not used MVVM Cross. I've seen MVVM Lite. I've not used any Calibre Micro. I've used Prism, but not in production apps. Well, no, that's probably not true either. So I've used a couple of them. And I actually even had this conversation with Dan one day. We were talking about, comparing and contrasting, and it's like every MVVM framework solves to handle certain things, like provide certain guidelines for how you should do things in MVVM. So it really becomes a flavor of what you like, as opposed to one is better than the other. Like you may not like chocolate, and chocolate may be my favorite ice cream flavor. That doesn't make any less ice cream, right? It just means your ice cream palette is different than my ice cream palette. So as long as the MVVM framework provides, I'll say, the core tenets of what an MVVM framework should provide, I think that it's okay whatever one you use. I will say that Reactive UI is one of the few that is, and it's funny because like we're an opinionated framework in the way we write our code, but we're an unopinionated framework in the sense that you can plug us in anywhere. We don't have a hard opinion on how you 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 probably could, and I'm not saying you couldn't. I wouldn't use Prism without using Prism's navigation, right? Like part of the reason why you use Prism is for Prism's navigation, right? That's part of one of the predefined things that Prism does well that you use it for. So, it becomes this use the right tool for the right thing again. And reactive UI is a tool that you can use with other MVVM platforms, because we're like, hey, we don't care. We'll just plug in where we need to, and you can get value. And that's a very big thing, because I don't like using Prism and MVVM cross in the same application, for example, would probably be catastrophic. Like, why would you do it? It doesn't make sense. And that's because reactive UI is kind of plugging into a specific niche with reactive programming, which gets back to, I found these event handlers that I want to turn into observables, because I want to try and play with a concept, and I'm going to play with this concept live here, and I'm not going to finish it. So you can just go ahead and be mad, be mad when you're like, oh, Rodney didn't make it work. I didn't get to see the magic. This is going to be a grueling process. Yeah, exactly. Because that's something that you can't do easily in Xamarin Forms. Like how they tell you to do it, or at least how they used to tell you to do it, was, oh, you use the binding context. And I'm like, you want me to, okay, I can, okay, that's fine. I'll do it. That's the only way to do it. I'll do it. So that was actually when I started Sextant, I was looking for a way to do navigation in an app that I had just brought reactive extensions into. Kent had just written a blog post about this. Yeah, messages. So I tell people, like, a message bus is a tool. It's a tool that we should use for a very specific purpose, and we should not overuse. Uh, but I digress. Kent had published a blog post about this approach. I went and took his blog post and implemented that approach. And I had a conversation with another consumer of Reactive UI around how we needed to formalize this. Because we were both trying to solve certain navigation concerns. And we didn't want to have to, like, we didn't, like, again, Prism has a lot going on. So I didn't want to bring in the bloat of Prism just to use Prism's navigation service and, call it hate if you want to. I am not a fan of URI navigation. Magic strings don't do it for me. So I wanted a view model to view model, because I had used Fresh MVVM and I liked the way Fresh MVVM did it, right? Like, I liked the view model to view model navigation. Come to find out, Reactive UI wanted to put together a story for view model to view model navigation. So, insert me there, and here we are. Looking at this navigation requested event. And this is why it was so interesting, right? Because one of the other things that Prism does well that I like, again, is it does a request response concept, where you're like, even though you're not sending in an explicit request, your Prism behind the scenes is more or less generating a navigation request for you and giving you a navigation result, which is another feature that I would like to support, because I think it's a really nice feature. So that said, I saw this navigation requested and was like, oh, this is really interesting. It actually provides the task. So I could actually get the task, tie into the task, see whether or not the task completed successfully or, through an exception. And then I can generate some navigation result. And the more I played with that, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. And then I thought about it. I was like, oh, that's going to be ugly. But what I did realize was that I'm calling my library, or this library, not my library, because it's technically owned by the .NET Foundation now. But I saw the opportunity to make it more reactive, because I call it a reactive library, but it's not really a reactive library, because it's not taking as much advantage of reactive paradigms as I would like. And I'll air my dirty laundry on stream. I don't care. I've got nothing to hide, I don't think. Or maybe I do have something to hide and I should hide it. Oh no. Where is that file? All right, because I don't look through it. I just do. I know I want the view stack service base. Yeah, that'll work. So one of the things that I am doing is I'm doing this really nice thing here where, in response to the page finishing, right, the view finishing its act of pushing something on, I am adding it to the stack and ticking, right? So to the untrained eye, this is like, yeah, this is great, right? Like I'm doing this thing, and and this do statement is going to go do this other thing. I've been using reactive extensions a lot. I won't say exclusively, but a lot for I'm having to do math now, 3 years. And I'll say this: do is good and do is not good. So like do, but don't do because do can be do. Oh man, I'm full of jokes tonight. Anyway, it's the fact that I've been in the house so much. I think is driving me batty. But like the do statement there does what I want, but it really doesn't because it doesn't really run this thing in process with the observable. Like it's not really running it in reaction to things happening. It's really what I want is this method to happen in response to the view element getting pushed onto the page or onto the view stack. Sorry. The page actually getting pushed onto the view stack. But I'm not. What I'm doing is when the push page happens, right after that, the do statement is going to happen. And really, whether this passes or fails, I'm just going to go ahead and tick that thing. So it hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure that at some point I'm going to come up and invent some genius way to hit that edge case and break everything. So looking at it, I was like, okay, let's figure this thing out. So this navigation requested, I thought like maybe I could change this eye view, and I actually created a new abstraction. So I'm thinking about strangling out the eye view and changing it to iframe. Shout out to the 90s to all web devs that ever did an iframe, because I like iframes and I feel like that's a great way to hold on to the good times we had. So subscribing to these navigation events, trying to figure out how do we get more value out of what the platform can provide us. Now, the hard part about this is that Sextant is a cross-platform solution, so it works right now. We target Xamarin Forms, Xamarin iOS, and UWP. Somebody submitted a Blazor PR that I have been looking at. I have not completed it, primarily because Blazor breaks my brain with how it does its notifications. It takes a JavaScript approach, and it's not that I can't think of the JavaScript approach. Like I understand it, I get it mostly. It's trying to marry that concept with a MVV, a concept like MVVM, where it doesn't really fit the MVU. So we're kind of like mixing and matching there, and it gets weird. So not caring about that issue, just trying to see how much more value I can get for the Xamarin Forms implementation, right? Make it as robust as possible and then figure out everything else later. I figured maybe we can look at some of this like pushed notification stuff and really dig into it and see what we can make happen. So there are parts of Blazor that feel unfinished. Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of going to kind of be anything in reality, because like it's never really finished. Like Sextant wasn't finished when we shipped it. It solved the top 3 bullets that we needed in order to be able to ship the app that the other developer was working on, and we shipped it. So, you know, it's never going to be finished, but I do agree that there are things that I get to in Blazor and I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel thought out. But also there are things in Blazor that just work. Like, and a buddy of mine sent me a message and he was like, Rodney, this Blazor thing, like, it's amazing. And I'm like, okay, yeah, until you try and do some MVVM stuff that he was like, oh, he was running down this whole, oh, I can create view models and I can use them and blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And eventually he came around to, I don't think he still has actually come around to seeing what I'm seeing, but he will, that there are just nuances that you have to account for. And again, I guess that's probably any platform. I can't single out Blazor. There's got to be nuances to any platform, any UI framework that you're using. So creating this navigation frame now, and using this to get closer to the metal and looking at these. I did do the requested events. Well then, let me go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and let's abstract an interface because we like to refactor. Interface all the things. Segregate your interfaces. Okay, so we'll do requested, 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 remove requested, insert requested. We're going to remove those out too, even though we know they're down a level in that iframe, because I think those are all the things that we want the iframe to look at, and those are just the events underneath the hood. Okay, so we'll do this. So the other thing I'll just kind of fill space talking is one of the other things that about Sextant, somebody was asking in ReactiveUI chat the other day about Sextant and Shell and wanting to know what's going on, how that's going to work, and I'm like, okay. I'm not really prepared to have that conversation. Like I had actually just started looking at the code, but I had just started looking at the code, so I commented that it may be a whole separate API because it may honestly just make sense to be a whole separate API. Like I'm not one that's like, oh, let's just create a facade around it and let's do it. If it makes sense to be a separate API because the API is so different, then it does. Right? Now, how you handle that, I honestly could care less. But, again, the whole right tool thing. So this pulls out, okay, so we call this an I navigation frame. We're actually going to take all of these things. We're going to move this up here. Yeah. We're going to enter. This is probably going to end sooner than later now because I'm getting kind of hungry. We'll just do this. We'll grab all of these, put these here, copy. Or actually, we probably don't even need that, right? Because like these are the only three on the interface. We just need to grab these, copy these. So I haven't decided whether or not this is smart yet, right? But we're going to play with it real quick and just kind of scope it out and see if Rodney can get to where he wants to be, and then we'll write some unit tests at another point in time. And we may even use this as a place where we talk about Microsoft Reactive.testing and the test scheduler, because I'll have to use the test scheduler in order to do this work. Let me move over because my chair is all out of whack. You don't want to see me write any of this stuff right now, so what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and copy and paste all the things. And this is just analyzers on the project that will enforce that I do the code things when I'm supposed to do the code things. So this is going to be, yeah, we'll go back and change those later. I'm sure somebody will comment on them on the pull request. Okay, so now I've got this iframe. I don't think I want to be famous. I don't think I want to be famous, honestly. Like, you have people in your business all the time. Like, even live streaming is enough for me. I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, this is great. We've interacted. I've had enough. Okay, so those events are at the top. So now I've got the pop request notification. So one of the things I've been doing recently is calling things. I've been converting the notion of events to notifications because that's really kind of all they are, is a notification that something happened. When you get into the observable, it's an invocation. Sextant. Okay. Yeah, okay, right, Rodney. Why don't you learn how to market? Sextant is this navigation library that Giuseppe Casagrande, I'm probably butchering his name, and myself created from this blog post. So I'll let me put this. Well, I don't even have. I'm a bad Twitch streamer. I don't have another monitor and a way to push this off right now to paste it in there. But I'll get this link to you. It's on ReactiveUI stuff, right? So you can get to ReactiveUI, you can get to this. It's just a navigation library, right? It's a standalone navigation library in the sense that it's not a full-featured MVVM framework with the navigation library. It's not a standalone navigation library in the sense that you right now, I think you have to take a dependency on ReactiveUI to use it, and maybe Splat. I could look, right? I've got the code here. Why don't we just go crack open the thing and look at it, Rodney? So we don't have to believe. Oh, yep. And that's probably because I'm using reactive object somewhere, because reactive object is great. Thank you, Harrison. Yeah, so I've been calling events notifications, but a buddy of mine and I were talking. We were doing some bike shedding, and he was like, "Well, the platform calls an event arg. I was calling them like event notification, or I was like instead of being like in a navigation event, I was calling it like navigation notification. I'm okay with calling it an event. The problem comes in where, like going back to the frame, if I don't give it a suffix, then I can't reuse it because this is the actual name of the event handler on the page. So I end up with naming conflicts potentially, which, yeah, nobody likes naming conflicts, because naming conflicts cause all the fun. And I could probably get around it by some level of object composition over inheritance, right? Like instead of this navigation frame take inheriting, there we go, extending the navigation page, I can potentially just new one up in my constructor and compose it that way. And maybe that's what I do. Maybe that's actually what I do. So that way I can have what I want and don't have to worry about the nonsense. You know what? I've convinced myself that it's worth a try. Because then I don't have to worry about any of this stuff, yeah? Or maybe I still have to care about a scheduler. Like, I still have to care about a scheduler. I still have to take all that stuff in. Yeah, oh, no. We don't want to do object composition there. Because then I can't get any of the, like, the bindable property stuff off of the navigation page. It becomes way more complicated. So, yeah, okay. Yeah, I realize again why we do the things we do and why we make the decisions we make. So right now I'm just going to go through this file and change everywhere where you see this. We are going to do this, and we're going to change it to yeah, so it's just a navigation library. So and I started it. I was using Fresh MVVM on a project. Fresh MVVM, it's not that it was incapable of doing what I wanted it to do, but I had just started getting into reactive programming. I read Kent's blog post. There was something that the designer wanted to do with the navigation that I didn't understand how to do. So I started doing a lot of research, and evil begets evil. So there we go. Evil begets evil. So of course, what ended up happening was I ended up getting with somebody and just rolling my own, because what good developer doesn't want to roll their own? For the record, I don't actually ever really want to roll my own. It's so much easier when somebody else does it for you, right? And then you can depend on them for the support, maintenance, and all that fun stuff. Oh yeah, maybe I should have done that differently. Yeah, I definitely should have done that differently. Okay. Oh no, we can do the same thing in the other in the navigation frame. So we'll just do the same thing here, and we'll do Control Shift H, and we will just go through and replace that one, and 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 that one. And we'll just do like replace all, because like replace all never hurt anything, right? Like replace all never is responsible for breaking stuff. Okay, now I do the same thing for equals. This is, see, yet again, so like my regex friend would just go write a regex, and he'd be like, oh, so yeah, I wrote a regex in like 3 seconds and it does the thing. And I'm like, okay. Right, I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. Like if your stuff works and it solves my problem, like I want to use your stuff. Like I don't want to go reinvent the wheel. But if it if I can improve on it or if I can learn something in the process and it solves it in a different way than you approach it. Like, because Prism doesn't really do view model to view model navigation, but they do have a navigation service, but it's not really view model to view model navigation. Fresh MVVM does view model to view model navigation, but it didn't do. Oh, that's what it is. It doesn't handle initialization of objects the way I want it to. People have probably heard me talk about async void is don't like avoided at all costs. There's a lot of async void stuff that ends up happening when I use at that point when I use Fresh MVVM. Now, granted, that was 3 years ago. But like now I use ReactiveUI as an MVVM framework because I have seen the light. Okay, so this will probably build. Um, so now that I've seen the light, like I had the opportunity to write a reactive implementation of a navigation service. It was something that the framework was looking for anyway. Was a view model to view model solution geared more towards forms. So yeah, everybody won in this scenario. Oh, it's getting late, which means I'm either going to go get food or beer soon. So we haven't actually accomplished much tonight, but we did a lot of talking. I guess that's like part of the fun of the live stream. And I think that's part of what I like about live streams with interactions of people versus like recorded videos. I like organic stuff. Not like organic food, although that's cool too. Um, so it's interesting when I get to interact with people and things just kind of develop. Another thing I'll point out here is my explicit use of observable.from event. I would like to point out, I'm actually going to change some of that up. I would like to point out that observable.from event gives you a much better performance than observable.from event pattern. So you should seek to use from event everywhere possible for performance reasons. If performance is not a concern, which, what developer cares about performance, then, use from event pattern. This has become, I've been forcing myself to write this a lot more lately, so this has become kind of second nature. So I understand this, and it feels good. But see, okay, so you see here I've got all of these. Yeah, here I'm doing a cast. I found this new trick, and I like this new trick, so I'm using it, right? I found a new hammer. Let's go get some nails or some screws or whatever's I'm going to nail into that wood or that concrete or whatever. Deprecating stuff. Maybe I make that obsolete. Maybe I don't. I don't know. Because I feel like page popped doesn't matter anymore when I can get directly closer to the navigation event. And here I literally just wrapped the event. Like I've got the view model that was requested, navigation request type. So like using it in the service that has access to a frame, and maybe I actually create like a completely different implementation just for now of the service that takes in the iframe, because I don't want to do too much noise. But what I would do here is like view stack service base. This code would then depend on that iframe here. Yeah, because it's obsolete, right? So we would pass in some iframe. All right. And now that it had, so that actually works. And then we'll call this, this is going to be way clearer than I thought it was going to be. Egads, brain. Oh no, we're changing the public API surface. So this is gonna this would be a breaking change. I'm just kind of playing with this now, so I'm okay with it being a breaking change. Like I'm working towards a v3 of the API anyway. I'm gonna do some overhauls. I've been taking a big look at Flutter recently, specifically because it has value when we talk about something like Comet or Maui with C# MVU. It becomes very, very relevant to understand why is Flutter being successful with MVU? What patterns are they employing that is making them successful? And how do we use those patterns in C# to make ourselves successful in the same way Flutter is, right? Like that's a thing. So I've been playing around with kind of Flutter's navigation system so that I can apply it to uh, the MVU stuff. I tried Flutter. Yeah, so things that I'm doing in preparation for Maui, right? This is like my personal checklist, and I'm actually going to probably write a blog post about this. Things that I'm doing to prepare myself for Maui, or yeah, things that I'm doing to get ready for my trip to Maui. That'll probably be it. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm learning Skia, so Skia Sharp, specifically because I've watched a couple of developers do Xamarin UI challenges, and they use Skia. And not to mention, Michael Stoneman uses Skia in his Aurora controls, in the 8-bot controls. He and his company use them in the Aurora controls. They use Skia to render things out, and Skia just seems so nice. So I feel like learning Skia makes it so that learning everything else is just like, okay, just give it to me, because I already understand like MVU as a concept. I already understand declarative UI because I deal with a declarative MVVM framework. So those things don't bother me. I'm already a C# UI guy, so these things don't bother me. So I feel like learning Skia just bridges everything, because the second I do that, it's just like I can just start gluing pieces together. Not to mention, I can use Pharmacist to generate Skia Sharp observables and change the way the world works. Anyway, so now this popped page, right? Because we're in the ViewStack service. So the ViewStack service has changed. We're in the base. We'll get back to all that other stuff that's red right now later. And we'll just look at this one, right? So here, when the page popped, we were doing a do statement and then subscribing safe. That's actually not what I want to do. I actually want to do this inline in the future, but page popped is going away. So now what we actually want to do is stuff here. So like now we can declare stuff on the view. Like so when the view dot pop event happens, right? I can do whatever that function is. So I actually may change. I'm actually going to change this into some function later. But I'll just subscribe, right? And then I can even, I don't think I need to enforce this on the main thread, but I'm going to do it anyway for now. So my general rule of thumbs is enforce the main thread until the main thread crashes. It's probably wrong. It's not actually my main rule of thumbs. I kid. I find that I use it more than not. Main thread scheduler, is that not here? Oh, I have to use view.main thread scheduler. So maybe I don't want to do that because we're not actually in the view layer right now. So maybe it's okay that whatever happens where it happens. But we'll subscribe. We'll call the underscore thing, and as a result, of this, this needs to be page popped. Oh, no, that's going to be the navigation event now. Oh, and we can't call it navigation, so we'll just call it popped. We'll call it popped page now, so that way we can then go back and refactor it and rename it. We're going to rename this to popped. Enter. Okay, so now we've got popped. We can do stuff and things. We're doing logger.debug nonsense, culture invariance. We're probably going to come back and clean some of this up. And I think as part of the V3, I'm going to actually add a lot more logging to this, because one thing that we did a while back was add more logging capabilities to Splat. So like now Splat logging will log out to your logger if you tie into it. So like in my application, like that, so like this is a library, but downstream in my applications, I may want to dig into what the underlying navigation surface is logging, and I can do that now with the ReactiveUI suite. So I'm going to actually bolster up some of this logging just to paint a better picture, give some debug statements, some info statements, some additional error statements. So that way you don't have to dig in and explicitly find the exception. You can just find the log statement of the exception too. Okay, so we're talking instead of coding. And yeah, so now this changes a lot of things. So now what I can do is my view we'll just take pop, for example, right? Or no, we'll do push because push is probably a better one. So yeah, that's the one we were talking about earlier anyway. So now like this do statement that push is doing, right? What I can do is I can very simply change this to that, right? So like all my service cares about when it's doing work is the work that it's doing. And now reactively, we are going to win the view. And I actually probably need to add some subscription stuff that when these to clean some of this stuff up behind me, some disposal stuff. But when the page event happens, I can now subscribe out here and do pushed, right? Oh, that says modal. We'll do page stack. Page stack. And like this will probably end up becoming different. Pushed dot page. All right, so what this does is now the second that the underlying platform, Xamarin Forms, triggers the event, I will get a subscription notification. Because I subscribed, I'll get a notification or an event surfaced, and I'll be able to add this here. So now I'm not doing it out of process after some function arbitrarily happens. If Xamarin Forms, for any reason, the navigation fails, this event should never fire, right? So now this is also a litmus test. Like now I'm also like testing the tester. I'm testing Xamarin Forms to verify that Xamarin Forms implemented it correctly, right? Like their spec should be such that the event shouldn't fire unless the navigation was successful. So the bigger question becomes now, like, how do I, given that, right? Like given that I have that thing, how do I change the API surface so that this will return a valid response, right? Like, and I don't know that off the top of my head. Like I'm going to have to go to the mountaintop and talk to some gurus in the RX space to figure out, am I just coding myself into a box? Am I making this more complicated than it needs to be? Because again, to me, right now, this is cool. But that doesn't mean that it's a thing that I should probably do. Maybe this is okay. Oh, you see what we did there? I see what I did there. That does need to be the modal stack. Yeah. Oh, haha. Place where RX shines. Dot. Where X such that X dot. Ooh. Okay, this is where doing an apples to apples may not be good. So the request event, oh shit. This is gonna be fun. So the request event actually has a navigation request type where we can say whether or not it's push pop, but it won't tell us what stack it's from, right? Like, because it's not telling us whether or not it's a modal. So how do we know? How do we know whether or not it's a modal? I don't think we do. I don't think there's any metadata that tells us that this is a modal event. So now, oh God, this is ugly. So, okay, hacks, right? Hacks. Let's talk about hacks. Hacks, what I can do is in the view, right? Like I can couple this with like the item. Oh God, that's gonna be so ugly, right? Like I can combine it with, let's do pushed event, right? Oh wow, that becomes really complicated. Yeah, so basically what I want to do is I want to understand where we are in the navigation structure and whether or not it's pushing from which stack it's pushing from. So technically the navigation page exposes the Pay, no. What do we want? We'll just do another select real quick so we can look at the API. Right, technically this thing exposes a, is it this? Let's do this dot. We're going to look at all of the things. What does it expose? I want to say it's like a, yeah, it's all me. There should be like an IEnumerable of, or it should be like a observable collection of elements that are on the stack. Yeah, because it gives us, okay, so this dot navigation, there it is. It's on the navigation, right? Navigation stack. So technically, oh, it's only an I read only list. Scheisse. Okay, so we won't be able to do that. Okay, so I at least got a chance to look at this API a little bit more and play around. So like now I have better context as to what it is that I'm looking at to go have the conversation with the gurus about why I shouldn't do this. Like why this is an extremely bad idea. Because if Xamarin Forms doesn't provide a mechanism for me to understand whether or not it's a modal, how do I know what it's doing? And like the navigation request doesn't even tell me whether or not it's a modal. It doesn't tell me the stack type. So like it's almost like I need a navigation request stack type, and I can probably generate that. Where am I generating these? I can't do it from there. Right, like I would want it to be in the navigation request itself. So I would want to know, like looking at the handler, maybe I have to do some math on the read-only list. Okay, so wait, I'm sorry, I just saw this question. It says now, is there two navigation stacks? Yes, there's two navigation stacks. One for pages and one for modals, but that's also not true because this is where like Xamarin Forms navigation I think becomes hard for people. Is like you can kind of do some inception stuff where you have a modal stack and then you push a navigation page onto it, and now you got a whole new navigation page that technically has a new navigation stack. So you can do like nested navigation stacks. I would shy away from this if I were you, because for a couple of reasons. Like I would push back with whatever your designer says. Modal navigation is like navigating inside, like changing the presentation of the modal is one thing. Like JavaScript frameworks, you'll see like I'll have like a little modal where you put some information in, and then there's like the rest of the screen, and like there's like a wizard type thing inside the modal. Okay, on the web, okay, but on no, just no. I don't care for it. I don't think it's a good pattern. I know a lot of developers that agree with me. I think modals should pop up, do their job, and expire. They should be like meeseeks. If you're a Rick and Morty fan, they should want to die. They should just want to go away as quickly as possible. And giving them navigation context makes them want to stay around longer, which allows you to do more funky things and make your own life harder. So like I haven't really learned everything I wanted to learn today, and hopefully this was valuable for people watching. But what I looked at today and what I did find is that there's a flaw in this approach, because I do not know which navigation stack is changing. And the only way for me to really know that information is to subscribe to the task. No, even subscribing to the task won't get me there. Like this is the navigation frame, right? So like let's just go to the navigation view because it's easier to look at. Let's get some structure. So on this navigation view, I have, let's go to like push modal, right? So on push modal, I'm explicitly doing a navigation dot push modal. So in my navigation view, I could technically do it here and provide additional context out. I don't know if that's the right place to do it, so I have to think about that. But this was fun for me because I got a chance to look at some of this stuff, and I got a chance to look at Sextant and talk about value converting. But I'm still looking for MVVM stuff that people want me to try and do. Fam Dave, who was in here earlier, has given me some challenges that I am trying to scaffold so that I can try them live. I just dropped my wedding ring. But yeah, I'm looking for anything, you know. Hey, Rodney, I do this in my MVVM framework. You tell me this reactive stuff is cool. Show me how it's better than the way I used to do it. You know, maybe we should like do a segment called "Hold My Beer," right? Or I guess this was supposed to be, you know, whiskey and code, so holding my beer probably isn't too far fetched. But yeah, I'm gonna go consume some sustenance at this point because food is a thing. I appreciate everyone who tuned in, everyone who watches this later. Again, I'll probably get into some test scheduler stuff when I get further into this iframe stuff, trying to figure out how to provide navigation results. I know what I can do. That'll be disconnected though. I gotta look at how Flutter does it because Flutter does it in their API. Like they provide like a promise. So I gotta figure out how I can provide a good navigation response. Make that part of the API. Yeah. Have a good night. Enjoy, and we'll see you next week.